Hey, this is Micah. I'm talking about some things I learned from Deep Work by Cal Newport. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is deep work? Well, let me tell you. It's any task that is cognitively challenging, that requires intense focus, that improves your skill, and that adds value to the world. There's an important distinction between deep work and shallow work. Some examples of this would be tasks that are repetitive, easy to automate, stuff you can do while distracted, such as checking email, posting on social media. We're living in an increasingly distractible world, therefore deep work is becoming increasingly rare, and since deep work is becoming more and more rare, it's becoming more valuable. That's just supply and demand and scarcity at work. So in order to protect ourselves in a new economy that's becoming more and more automated, we have to develop skills that are extremely hard to automate, that are extremely difficult for machines. Someone like Bill Gates programmed the first version of BASIC in just 8 weeks, which was only possible during sessions of deep work, being able to focus and concentrate. It is hard to concentrate, not just because there's so many distractions with the internet and so many countless ways we can entertain ourselves, but it's actually physically hard on our brains. It's a skill that takes time to develop and to cultivate. So for instance, a guitarist learning how to play guitar, there's a process in the brain for the relevant parts of the brain responsible for understanding music, where this protein myelin actually develops around the neurons in the brain, which allows for the neural circuits to communicate more effortlessly and effectively. So it really is like exercising a muscle, where it's extremely difficult, but the more you do it, the more your muscle fibers grow and become more powerful. So deep work really is an exercise for the brain, not just speaking metaphorically or poetically, but it literally changes the structure of your brain in a physical way. So just like any physical exercise, doing deep work is extremely hard and uncomfortable at first. Also, like a physical exercise, it can't be maintained 24 hours a day. In fact, most people can only sustain a deep work session for about an hour, where experts can do deep work sessions for about 4 hours. How do we develop habits for deep work in a world where everything is competing for our attention? So deep work is much more difficult than posting a tweet or checking email. It releases dopamine, so it's very addicting. It feels like we're being productive when we're checking the email every 10 minutes. It's actually destroying our ability to focus, because our brain is feeling those reward chemicals for being distracted. So we actually live in an environment that encourages being distracted, and our brains are literally being hijacked by feel-good chemicals that are telling us that this is necessary for survival, and then we become uncomfortable with boredom. But in order to develop a capacity for deep work, Cal Newport actually suggests embracing boredom and having periods where you're not trying to be entertained at every moment, or the second you want to check your email or your Facebook or Instagram is the second you should pause and reflect and just see how long you can sit with not checking it. In fact, he actually has a chapter that suggests quitting social media altogether, because there's a lot of research that proves it's really not great for our mental health. And in fact, people who use social media the most tend to also be the most anxious and depressed. If you have some type of online business, or you're like a YouTube celebrity or something, that's really not an option. It kind of depends on what type of work you do. Like Gary Vee is on the total opposite side of the spectrum with his opinion of social media, which he suggests you should completely embrace it and figure out how to use these systems to your advantage. And I would kind of agree with both Cal Newport and Gary, but probably more like a middle way. Like, don't just abandon technology because things are going to always be changing. It's just, the trick is to just figure out how to use it in a healthy way. It's just a tool. The internet's just a tool, like a hammer. You know, it's neither good nor bad, it's neutral. A hammer can be used to build a house, or it can be used to smash someone's skull in. The first option is good, if, you know, because someone has to live somewhere. The second option is bad because it's, you know, super bad. Some tips for doing the whole deep work thing, I wrote them down because I don't want to give the wrong tips or anything. But the first tip is to schedule distraction-free work period. So I find that it's normally best to do deep work at the beginning of your work period, because you have the most energy. I mean, I have the most energy, you know, earlier in the morning. I can focus more on the hard tasks. But like, say you're writing a novel and you work at a job that has nothing to do with writing, just a normal 9 to 5, your deep work session could be from 7 to 8 in the morning, and you don't check email, you don't have any distractions, and you just focus that 1 hour every morning. That becomes your deep work ritual, and it's really helpful to have a scheduled time for it, because so much difficulty comes just from starting, not knowing what time to start or how am I going to schedule this. So if it becomes a ritual, it'll become a habit, which is something you won't even think about. You'll just end up doing it. So number 2 is a deep work ritual, which I just talked about. So number 3 is disconnect from the workday. It is like working out, where you have to rest. You have to have a rest period. I don't know why I'm talking about working out, because I don't work out, but I used to try to, like in 9th grade. Anyways, so disconnect at the end of the workday. And a good way to disconnect is to write down all the tasks that you didn't finish, and then make an action plan for the next day. This way you unload all the stuff you're worrying about, you know, instead of thinking, oh man, I didn't get this thing done, and like, I hope I don't forget about it. Well, if you write it down, then it's out of your head, and then you can separate your work from your life, you know, and that's really necessary. And you also have to get really good sleep, because deep work is it's difficult on your brain, so being able to sleep will recharge your attentional reserves, and you'll be able to have more productive deep work. It's not just about the quantity, but the quality. Like, if it's like kind of like Parkinson's law, where the amount of work you have to do will fill the amount of time allotted to do that work. So for instance, if you had 8 hours to draw a house, you would take that 8 hours fussing over the details and fussing over the windows and just all these details. But if you only had 1 hour to draw the house, you would find a way to draw that house in 1 hour, and you would only put the most necessary details to communicate effectively that this is a house. And in fact, the house you draw in 1 hour might be a lot better than the house you would have drawn in 8 hours, because there is such a thing as overdrawing, overworking something. I personally like to end my work sessions on animation with a half-finished drawing. That way, when I come back to my Cintiq and turn it on, there is a starting point, and I don't have to push that gas pedal as hard to get going up to speed. It's like I'm already on the highway. I just have to plop into the car and we're already going pretty fast. So ending your work on a good stopping point where it's easy to pick it back up can be really helpful as well. So these are just some things I learned from deep work, and that's all I have to say about that, and thank you for watching.